First up is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein, a nefarious character, one who has what we shall call a dedicated fan base. I thought that this book was one of the most tedious that I'd ever read. I finished it out of a sense of professional obligation, and I don't think I would have made it through otherwise. It's about a prison on the moon that ceases to be a prison, and the occupants of the moon seek to overthrow the tyrannical rule of Earth in order to establish a libertarian paradise. It's written in first-person perspective from the protagonist, who is, well, I called him Russian in another video and I got a million outrage comments saying, actually if you read into the lore, he's not actually Russian. It's because culturally it's heterogeneous now on Earth, and you need to do a little bit more research on Heinlein before you form an opinion. So not Russian. Russian asterisk. It's written with like a Russian dialect, with like a Russian accent. Total distraction made it hard to read. Heinlein also writes with this really overweening sense of cleverness. He's in love with his own. It's not a politics thing, you know, like I think Heinlein people, when they hear me criticize Heinlein, especially if they know that I am a left-winger, they think it's because I simply am not adequately based to appreciate Heinlein. It's just that he's annoying. There are plenty of right-wing authors that I have read who are not annoying. Heinlein is annoying. Heinlein is also a lech. He just reminds me of the teachers that I had in high school who would kind of peer and leer at the female students, mostly substitute teachers, and they all had reputations at the school, but it felt like it was written by some kind of guy, you know, some kind of guy. Next is The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. Picture, if you will, a novel that is, I don't know, 500-600 some pages long, and 300 of those pages are dedicated to dinner parties. Endless dinner parties of the characters falling in love with one another and holding hands and bonding. It's a first contact story. Alpha Centauri, aliens, communicate with us somehow, I don't even remember. And while the world governments are trying to decide what to do about it, there is a contingent of Jesuits who buy a mining asteroid, retool it to be a spaceship, send themselves to Alpha Centauri, make contact with the aliens, and the protagonist is the only one who survives, and that is not a spoiler. The protagonist is a Jesuit priest who struggles with his faith. What an interesting twist on a religious character. Comes back to Earth, a broken man, is nursed back to health, and can he piece his faith back together? There's that kind of janky skeleton of the plot and the characterization, and then layered on top of that is a bunch of Big Bang Theory level quippy quips. All the characters speak like Redditors, which is just amazing because it was written in like 1986, so how did she pull it off? How did she know? There were a couple of highlights. There were a couple of bits of characterization and dialogue that were not torture. Some of the relationships between the priest, the protagonist priest, and the other priests I thought were good, and there's a little bit of world building and xenobiology, xenosociology that I thought was cool. It should have been around 200, 250 pages long, and it should have cut out all the humor and whatever. Should have. Very arrogant of me to say what Mary Doria Russell should have done, but that's what she should have done, to please book pilled, which is why everybody writes their books. Next is Nightflyers by George R.R. Martin, which is a novella. I found it forgettable, boring. I don't have a lot of scorn to heap upon it, just because I remember basically nothing about it. It just was totally boilerplate, forgettable, pulpy science fiction with very low literary value. I truly remember pretty much nothing about it. I would have to go back and re-watch my review video of it to be able to tell you anything interesting. So I guess I'm just telling you nothing interesting. Next is River of Gods by Ian McDonald, a cyberpunky thriller that came out, I think, in 1997. And I was seduced by it for the first half or so. because it has this kind of electric, high voltage. It was a very AC/DC type of a book, and it worked on me for a while, and then it just started feeling like a gimmick. It just ran thin. It was like if you took Blade Runner and turned it into an airport thriller and injected a ton of smut into it and then set it in India. That is River of Gods. There's a cat. Where's the cat? Hi. Hi. This is my loud co-host. He shows up in front of my door and bellows until I open it. Yeah, it just got really, really annoying. It got really annoying really fast around the halfway point, and then it was just a labor to finish. And it was kind of like Pandora's Star in that I had read enough of it that I didn't feel that I could set it down and move on, and I wanted to give it a second chance to redeem itself, and it never really did. Oh, he's eating cobwebs now. That's not vegan. The whole thing just had this kind of like frosted tips, sort of a tude, and it hasn't aged that well. And it's also a really diffuse plot. It's sort of convoluted, and it's not narratively gratifying. There's not a lot of payoff at the end. And finally, The Goat Without Horns by Thomas Burnett Swann. I think the only book on this list that maybe is so bad that it's good. Swann was a poet as well as a fiction writer, and he wrote mostly fantasy, I think a little smattering of science fiction, but mostly fantasy, and was a very good writer. Not a good novelist, but a good writer. His prose was really strong. This is the second Swann book that I've read. The other one was Will-o'-the-Wisp, and that one was very similar in that it featured an actual real-world poet as the protagonist. And both books have poetry worked into the prose, actual snippets of real-life poetry. Goat Without Horns is an astonishingly poor mishandling of some themes, we'll say. It stars a poet, I don't remember his name, but he was a real poet who died in World War I, and instead of dying in the war, he goes to a tropical island in the Caribbean to tutor the 13-year-old tomboyish daughter of a voluptuously beautiful middle-aged woman. And on this island, there is a dolphin who makes friends with the protagonist, and it turns out that the dolphin understands English, and that dolphins, period, understand English and have been watching us for all of the ages and constructing oral histories about us. And their friendship blossoms, and it goes to just simply insane places that I don't think I can really talk about safely on YouTube. I have a 22-minute long review in gruesome detail of The Goat Without Horns on my Patreon, which is $5. You get a review video of each individual book that I read, and I record the videos right after I read them, so you get fresh thoughts, and you get those in advance and in greater depth and detail than you get on the summary videos. That video was a hit because it goes to outer space. Not literally, but it's a remarkable bungle. Something to behold. Not a book that I liked, but a book that I kind of admire in its madcap incompetence. Those are the only 5 that I would say probably don't read. Although, The Goat Without Horns, maybe you should read it if you find it. But I can't say that it's good. In fact, I must say that it is bad. So those are the 5 bad books out of 39 or 40, maybe 41 at this point, which is pretty good. It's been a good year. I have another video that's about the best that I read if you're curious about that. All right, thanks for watching.